There is a particular kind of quiet that lives inside a storm. Not the absence of sound, the storm is everywhere, pressing at the glass, shaking the couplings, howling through every gap in the bodywork of a train that should, by any reasonable measure, have been canceled tonight. But inside the quiet I mean, there is a stillness. The stillness of a thing that has decided what it is going to do and is waiting with enormous patience for the moment to do it. The Stormward Limited runs the Dublin coastal line on a timetable that the Railway Authority has politely described in its most recent audit as irregular. It serves 7 stops between the capital and the small harbour town of Carrigmore. On a clear evening, it is a pleasant journey. 40 miles of Atlantic-facing coastline, sea light and hedgerow, the smell of brine coming through the ventilation. On a night like this, in a gale that is currently tearing roof tiles from buildings in 3 counties and pushing wave tops 30 feet above the harbor walls, it is something else entirely. Thomas Reed is 61 years old and has been retired for 4 years, 3 months, and 11 days. He knows the precise count not because he is sentimental about it, but because precision is a habit formed over 32 years in the service, years in which the ability to know exactly how much time had passed and exactly how much remained was sometimes the difference between coming home and not coming home. He boards the Stormward Limited at Connolly with a single leather bag, a return ticket he has no intention of using, and the specific expression of a man who has agreed to do something he is not certain he should have agreed to. His face is the kind of face that weathers, not aged so much as accumulated, the way coastline accumulates. He takes a seat in the second carriage, starboard side, facing forward. He has always faced forward on trains. It is not superstition, it is simply that he prefers to see what is coming. The train's interior is a studied collision of eras. The seating is velvet deep green, tufted, the kind of upholstery that speaks of a railway that once believed in itself. The lighting is brass-fitted and warm, but the fixtures have a quality of wrongness that Reed clocks within the first 2 minutes of sitting down, the way an experienced eye clocks a forgery, not by any single detail, but by the accumulated texture of all the details at once. The brass is too bright for its age. The window seals are modern rubber under antique-looking trim. The ventilation grills are slightly too symmetrical, as though they were designed rather than retrofitted. Someone has built an old train carefully. That is not the same as having an old train. There is an accountant in the seat 2 rows forward. Reed designates him by profession not because he knows it as fact, but because the man has the specific anxiety of someone whose relationship with numbers has gone wrong. Late 40s, gray suit, the knot of his tie loosened in the manner of a man who started the day with good intentions and ended it in a different country than he planned. He has no luggage in the overhead rack. He keeps his hands clasped on the table in front of him and does not look at the window, the aisle, or any other passenger. He looks at his hands. He looks at them the way you look at the one thing you trust, and Reed notes that a man who trusts only his own hands is a man who trusts nothing outside himself. In the carriage's small lounge alcove, a mahogany booth with leather bench seating, a lamp that swings gently with the motion of the train, a woman reads. She is perhaps 50, the kind of academic whose intelligence has organized itself into physical presence, deliberate movements, a stillness of attention, glasses that she removes and replaces with the rhythm of someone who uses them to think rather than to see.
The book is old, not antique old in the decorative sense. Old in the sense of having been consulted many times, in private, by people who were careful about where they did it. Reed has seen books like that before. They come from libraries that aren't cataloged. They cross borders in diplomatic pouches. Their readers are, almost universally, people pursuing something that official channels have declined to acknowledge. The attendant's name is Finn. The badge says so, a small enamel thing, green and white, the kind of badge a young man wears with the seriousness of someone new to a uniform. He is perhaps 23. He moves through the carriage with the careful efficiency of training that is recent enough to still be visible in the body, the slight formality of a person performing competence rather than inhabiting it. When he brings Reed a cup of tea without being asked, Reed considers whether this is intuition, instruction, or something else. And then there is the man in the cafe car. Reed sees him on a pass-through to find the facilities, a broad-shouldered figure behind the service counter, arranging cups with the methodical calm of someone who is doing one thing while being very aware of another. His accent, when he answers Reed's brief inquiry about the menu, carries the specific flatness of the northern Slavic coast, not Russian, closer than Russia. Reed returns to his seat. He watches the lights of Dublin fall away behind them. The gale presses the windows as though testing their integrity. The track curves toward the coast, and the sea, invisible in the dark, but enormous, present, audible even over the engine, begins to run alongside them like something that has been waiting. Thomas Reed opens his bag. He does not take anything out of it. He simply checks by feel that the things inside it are where he left them. They are. He closes the bag. He faces forward.
Later, much later, when Reed is asked to reconstruct the sequence of events with the precision that his former colleagues will require, he will say that the accountant was there at 22:47 and gone at 22:49. He will be precise about this because he noted the time both before and after, the way he notes the time of every significant event. 2 minutes, perhaps 120 seconds, in which a man who had been sitting across the lounge table, turning a whiskey glass in small circles with the mechanical repetition of profound anxiety, simply ceased to be present. It is not that he got up. Reed would have seen him get up. It is not that he slipped out to the facilities or the next carriage. Reed was facing the only exit. What happened in those 120 seconds has a quality, the specific quality of a thing that your mind reaches for and finds that its hand closes on nothing, that Reed will spend a considerable amount of energy not thinking about, because thinking about it too directly produces a sensation very similar to the ground shifting underfoot. The man was there, the man was not there, the whiskey glass was still turning. "Did you see where he went?" Reed asks the elderly man nearest the door. The man looks at him with mild and genuine confusion. "Who?" "The man at my table. Gray suit, 40-something. He was sitting here." The elderly man turns to his companion. She shakes her head, not unkindly. "There's been no one at that table all evening," she says. "Just yourself." Reed sits with this for a moment. He has been lied to by professionals. He knows what lying looks like in a face, the microscopic latency before the reply, the slight recalibration of the eyes, the management of expression that leaves a seam. There is no seam in either face looking back at him. They are not lying. They genuinely do not remember a man in a gray suit, because for reasons Reed cannot yet articulate, that man has been removed from their memory as cleanly as he was removed from the seat. Finn appears at the door of the lounge with the timing of someone who has been nearby and has now decided that proximity is required. Reed watches the young attendant's face move through a rapid internal negotiation, the professional calm of his training, and something underneath it that is not calm at all, something that looks, in the lamplight, like the specific expression of a person who has seen this before and has been hoping very hard that it would not happen again tonight. Reed does not ask him about it yet. He knows the value of letting people arrive at disclosure on their own schedule. He simply says, "My cabin number." Finn tells him. His voice is steady. His hands, carrying the tray, are not. The note is on the pillow. not slid under the door, not left on the small writing ledge, on the pillow, as though placed there by a careful hand that knew Reed was coming, knew which cabin was his, and had access to it in the few minutes between the attendant assigning it and Reed arriving. Folded once. No envelope. The handwriting is printed, not cursive, in small, precise capitals that carry no regional character Reed can identify. The handwriting of someone trained to write without leaving traces of themselves in the letter forms. The wind carries debts long overdue. Reed reads it twice. He turns it over. The reverse is blank. He smells it. Paper, nothing else. He holds it to the cabin's small reading light. No watermark, no indentation suggesting a previous note above it on a pad. A clean piece of paper on which someone has written a clean piece of warning. He thinks about the accountant. A man with anxious hands and no luggage, traveling alone at night on a train that runs in conditions serious enough to ground aircraft. A man who looked at his hands the way you look at the one thing you still possess. What does an accountant owe? The better question, the question that Reed's 32 years have taught him to ask first, is, to whom? In the lounge car, visible through the cabin's open door, there are 3 passengers at the window bench. Reed saw them when he passed through: an older man with a newspaper, a woman in a red scarf, a teenager with earphones. In the second of lightning, there are none. In the darkness after it, the newspaper is still open on the bench, folded to the crossword section. The red scarf is draped over the seat back. The earphones are coiled on the table. 3 people, gone in the space of a lightning flash. Their belongings left behind with the particular tidiness of a place setting after the guests have risen. Reed presses his back to the cabin wall. He breathes with the deliberate control of a man who has been in situations where fear was a luxury he could not afford, and has therefore learned to convert it, in real time, into something more useful. Clarity, he thinks. Let it be clarity. There is a particular discipline required when moving through a train that may or may not be safe, toward a situation that may or may not be resolved by moving toward it, in conditions that make retreat impossible, and arrival at your destination a simple matter of whether the tracks hold. Reed applies this discipline. He moves forward because standing still is, in the train's specific architecture of danger, the most exposed position. The professor is in the corridor outside berth 11. She has not knocked on the door, and she is not going to knock on the door, because the door is open 4 inches, and through the gap, something can be smelled that has made her stop in a way that a person who has spent 30 years studying history, which is to say, 30 years studying what humans do to each other when they believe no one is watching, recognizes immediately and cannot unknow. Her name is Dr. Aoife Moran. She tells Reed this in the flat, factual tone of someone whose mind is already several steps ahead and who is providing this information not as introduction, but as inventory. Here is who I am. Now let's establish what we are dealing with. What they are dealing with, berth 11 is disheveled in the way that a room becomes disheveled when something happens quickly. The small bedside reading lamp is on the floor, but unbroken. The single pillow has been pressed against the wall, the indentation of a head still visible in it, the specific geometry of someone who sat up sharply from a lying position. On the floor near the base of the bunk, a smear, dark, oxidized at the edges, recent at the center. Blood. Not the quantity of violence, the quantity of contact. A hand pressed down, fingers spread. 4 distinct pressure points visible in the smear, and then nothing. No trail, no drag, no continuation. The hand pressed down,
and the person attached to it simply stopped being in the room. On the small shelf above the bunk, pinned under the base of the overturned lamp, a second note. Same handwriting as the first, same precise capitals. The paper slightly crumpled at one corner, as though it was placed there in haste, or as though the room's brief violence disturbed it. The aligned do not need to bleed. This one resisted.
Reed and Dr. Moran stand in the corridor and look at each other with the mutual recognition of two people who have independently arrived at the same conclusion and are each waiting for the other to say it first. She says it first. Something is selecting people, she says. Selecting and processing. The ones who go quietly leave nothing behind. This one, she nods toward the smear, went anyway, but not without a cost to something. What's in the book? Reed asks. She considers him for a moment. Then, have you heard of the Brana papers? He has not. They're a collection of technical documents from a very specific Irish state infrastructure project that ran from 1971 to 1983 and was officially described as a signals modernization program for the National Rail Network. What they actually describe, what a researcher named Kaiva Brana spent 11 years piecing together before she died of a very ordinary cardiac event at 54, is something else. A system. A targeting system built into the train infrastructure itself. Reed looks at the walls of the carriage, the brass fittings, the symmetrical ventilation grills. Her notes describe a device, Moran continues, a device installed in a specific carriage, or perhaps the concept of a specific carriage, a carriage that can be present or absent depending on conditions, that measures something about the people inside the train, not biometrics, something she calls temporal debt, a reckoning function. The system was designed to find people who owed something to a state, to an institution, to a record, and to resolve the debt. By making them disappear? By, she pauses, realigning them. That's the word she uses consistently, realignment. It implies the person still exists somewhere, just no longer here. He is standing at the coupling door between the sleeping car and the next carriage forward. His face has the color of a person who has received news that confirms a fear they've been managing for some time. The driver, he says. I can't reach the front of the train. He means by radio. He means by the internal phone line. He means, Reed understands, in any way that he has tried. How long? Reed asks. Since Greystones. 20 minutes. Reed does the calculation. 20 minutes. 6 passengers vanished that he knows of. A man's blood on a berth floor. A driver who is either gone or, and this is the possibility he turns away from immediately and will return to later when there is time, no longer necessary. There are sounds that a building makes, or a vehicle, or a machine, that the human ear cannot attribute to any known mechanical process. Reed has heard them in basements in 3 countries, in a ship's hold off the coast of a place he is not permitted to name, in the server rooms of organizations that do not appear on any government organogram. A hum that carries information without transmitting it in any form you can decode. A hum that tells you, something in here is working very hard and has been working very hard for a very long time toward an end that you were not consulted about. The door to the final carriage is not locked. This is significant. A locked door can be explained. An unlocked door to a carriage that hums with unattributed energy on a train running driverless through a coastal gale communicates something more deliberate. It says, you are expected. It says, this was always part of the route. The carriage inside is not configured for passengers. There are no seats, no overhead racks, no tables. The floor is bare metal, clean to the point of sterility, the specific cleanliness of a laboratory or a theater where what happens cannot leave a residue. Along both walls, at the height of a standing person's chest, panels of an alloy that Reed cannot identify.
dark, slightly iridescent, warm to the eye in a way that metal is not ordinarily warm. And at the far end of the carriage, mounted against the rear wall where a coupling door would be, but is not, a device.
It is not large. In the taxonomy of things that change the world, it is almost modest, the size of a writing desk, roughly rectangular, its surfaces interrupted at intervals by ports and apertures that serve purposes Reed cannot immediately determine. From one aperture, a light projects, blue-white, not quite the blue of electricity and not quite the white of a photograph, something between them, the color of a thing that exists between states. The projection shows people. They stand in the light the way the light seems to require, upright, still, arranged at intervals with the particular spacing of a group that has stopped moving. Their faces are visible. Reed walks closer, slowly, and recognizes none of them, and then recognizes all of them because they are the passengers, the elderly couple from the lounge, the woman in the red scarf, the teenager with the earphones, the accountant in the gray suit, his hands clasped in front of him, no longer anxious, no longer anything much, his face arranged in the flat, patient expression of a person who has been removed from context and has not yet decided what to do about it. They stand in a blue-lit void. They are standing very still. They are breathing. "Realignment," she says quietly. Finn behind them. "Are they alive?" The device answers before Reed can, not in English, not in any language, but in the specific grammar of a machine that has been instructed to communicate. The projection shifts, and the passengers in the blue void turn slowly, uniformly, as though receiving a signal, and face the lens. They look through it, or perhaps at Reed, and their expressions remain flat, but their eyes are open. The device emits a sound, not a hum, now a tone, rising, and from somewhere in the structure of it, text appears in the projection, floating above the standing passengers in the same precise capitals as the notes. Deaths recorded, realignment active. The Stormward runs its original route.
Reed has been in rooms where the nature of a situation became clear all at once, the kind of clarity that is not relief, but rather the specific sensation of a cage becoming visible in the moment that you understand you are already inside it. He has learned in those rooms that the first productive question is never "what is this?" and never "why is this happening?" but always, simply, "what can be moved?" What can be moved? He looks at the device, at its ports and apertures, at the projection of the passengers in the void, breathing, standing, waiting, at the panel beside the primary aperture where two inputs sit, a keypad, dark and dormant, and beside it a palm reader, its surface barely glowing. He looks at his hands. He looks at the palm reader. The shadows come before he can act. They enter the carriage the way smoke enters a room, not through the door, but through the seams, through the joins between wall panels, through the gap under the door, through the grills, each one the approximate shape of a person, but approximate only like a description of a person assembled from memory rather than observation. They move to the walls. They face inward. 4, then 6. Their attention, if attention is the right word for what a featureless shape directs at you, is complete and focused and utterly without threat, which is perhaps the most frightening thing about them. They are not stopping Reed. They are watching him choose. Thomas Reed has 32 years of professional secrets and approximately 14 minutes before the Stormward Limited reaches Carrigmore, which is, in this context, not a destination, but a terminus. Dr. Moran has told him what the Brana papers say happens at a terminus. The device completes its cycle. The realigned passengers are filed. The record closes. Whatever opens next, Brana was not specific about, because whatever opens next was the thing that killed her. 14 minutes.
He thinks about the shadows on the walls, watching, patient, still. He thinks about the accountant's hands, clasped on the table in the posture of a man who has been waiting to be caught for so long that the waiting has become its own kind of sentence. He thinks about the note on his pillow. The wind carries debts long overdue. And he thinks with the specific, uncomfortable precision that 32 years of intelligence work produces in a man who has spent that time handling the debts of nations about what he owes. He is not on this train by accident. He accepted the journey because a phone call from a number he recognized, a number that should have been disconnected 4 years ago, told him that something on the Stormward Limited needed his attention. He accepted it because he has, in 4 years of retirement, found that the thing he is worst at is the absence of purpose. He accepted it because somewhere in the accounting of his career, in the decisions made, the people used, the information traded, there is a ledger that he has not settled. And he has known this, in the quiet way you know things you have decided not to examine, for a very long time. The device's palm reader glows. The shadows do not move. He turns. She is looking at the projection, at the passengers in the blue-lit void, at the accountant standing still among the others, his face flat, his hands finally unclenched. She points. In the void, slightly apart from the others, another figure has appeared. Not one of the missing passengers. Someone Reed has not seen on the train tonight. A woman, older than most of the others, standing in the blue light with her eyes not closed and not open in the way of the realigned, but open in the full, conscious way of a person who is present and watching, looking directly at the lens. Looking, Reed understands after a moment that takes his breath, at him. He knows her.
He knew her. More precisely, past tense, because she died of a very ordinary cardiac event at 54, 11 years ago, after spending most of her life piecing together a truth about a railway system that no one wanted pieced together. Kiva Brana, the researcher, the one who wrote the papers. She was never a passenger, she was never on a manifest. She is in the void because the device collected her long before tonight, long before any of this, and she has been waiting in the blue light for the person who would understand what the palm reader requires. Not biometrics. The Brana papers were specific about this, and Moran repeats it now in a low, steady voice. Not biometrics. The palm reader reads intent. It reads the specific frequency of a person who knows what they have done, acknowledges what they owe, and is willing to submit it to a record that cannot be revised or expunged or filed under a classification so deep that it effectively ceases to exist. A confession in the oldest sense, not to God, not to a court, to the record itself. Reed has spent 32 years keeping things out of records. He places his hand on the palm reader. It is warm. He does not speak aloud. What passes between his hand and the device has no linguistic form. It is not a list of transgressions, not a confession in the narrative sense. It is closer to a surrender of resistance, the resistance of a man who has spent a professional lifetime treating information as currency, treating people as variables, treating consequence as something that could be managed with sufficient foresight and sufficient distance between the decision and the outcome. The resistance drops. The device knows what to do with it. The passengers in the void begin to move, not toward the lens, toward each other, slowly with the careful, tentative movement of people returning to themselves from a very long distance. The accountant unclenches his hands. The woman in the red scarf, still in the void, still in the blue, reaches for the scarf that is not there, and then pauses, and then seems to remember that she is wearing it, that she was always wearing it, that the void is perhaps a distance between states rather than a place.
Kiva Brana watches this for a moment. Then she looks at Reed, and the expression on her face is not gratitude. It is too complicated for gratitude. It is the expression of someone who has been waiting a long time for this specific person who could close a loop that she spent her life identifying, and who is now watching the loop close. She raises one hand. The projection ends. The accountant is back in his seat. His hands are in his lap. He is looking out the window for the first time. On time, Reed stands in the device carriage, which is already becoming less itself, the panels losing their iridescence, the hum dropping away to silence, the space taking on the quality of a room that was briefly occupied by something it will not keep. The shadows on the walls are the last to go. They do not dissolve dramatically, they simply become less present, the way shadows become less present when the light that casts them shifts, not extinguished, just released. The platform at Carrigmore is small and salt-bleached, and the gale has dropped in the last 10 minutes of the journey from a force that felt like the world ending to something that merely feels like a very bad night. The rain still falls, the sea is still loud, but the specific fury of the storm, the sense of it as intention rather than weather, is gone. Reed stands on the platform. Dr. Moran stands beside him. Finn is helping passengers off the train with the slightly dazed professionalism of a young man who has experienced something that his training did not cover and is filling the gap with procedure, because procedure is what he has.
Reed watches the train. He watches it the way he watches things, with the specific, patient attention of someone waiting to see what it will do next. The Stormward Limited does not linger. It never does. The doors close, the engine present again, audible again, operating in the normal and explicable way of an engine with a driver and a timetable, begins to pull the train back up the track, back toward Dublin, back toward whatever it is and whatever it carries on the next run. The device carriage, if you look for it now from the platform, counting the carriages as they pass, is not there. 6 carriages in, 6 carriages out. Whatever mathematics governs its presence and absence has resolved for tonight to absence. Moran says, "Will they remember?" Reed thinks about the realigned passengers, about the quality of their expressions as they returned to themselves, the slightly recalibrated blink, the hand reaching for the scarf. Enough, he says. Not all of it. Enough to make different choices. She considers this. Is that what you did? The palm reader. Were you realigned? He considers the question with the honesty that the palm reader apparently has a way of insisting upon. Not realigned, he says, just recorded. There's a difference. She nods. She does not ask what was recorded. Some things do not need to be spoken aloud to be understood. She opens the book, the old, careful, uncatalogued book, and finds the last page of Queeve Brana's notes. At the bottom of the final page, in handwriting that is slightly different from the rest, slightly less formal, slightly more tired, the handwriting of someone writing at the end of a very long effort, a single line that Moran has not read to read before, because until now she was not sure it was meant for anyone. She reads it to him now. The train does not punish, it reminds. What you do with the reminder is your own. Reed picks up his leather bag from the platform bench. He has a return ticket he has no intention of using. He will walk to the harbor. He will find lodging. He will sit in the morning with the list of things that have been recorded, and he will begin the work of deciding what he is going to do with the reminder. The Stormward Limited disappears around the headland. Its lights diminish into the rain and the dark of the coastal night. Somewhere ahead of it, the storm continues. Somewhere in its carriages, a device counts. Somewhere in a blue-lit space between states, a researcher who died of a very ordinary cardiac event at 54 stands in the light and waits for the next person who will press their hand to the palm reader and mean it. The wind comes off the water. It carries nothing now but salt and distance.